In the beginning, God was without form. There was nothing being done with that enormous potential of energy and power that is the nature of God. Now, there's no explanation of God that we could render understandable to you, but let us create the image within you of a God that was all potential. The rule of life in all the universe is the rule of growth. All things grow. And while the roots are simple, as growth continues, the expression of God's nature grows more and more complex, grows more and more images that are reflections of God. Now, we're using temporal terms, time, in the beginning. There was no beginning, and there is no time outside of this physical frame of reference. Yet there is progress and change and growth. And so in the God that began without form, in that infinite potential of power, that energy called God began to create, to use that power to bring forth matter, to use that power to gradually create a structure of reality that spans dimensions, that spans space and time. Gradually the structure becomes more complex as God's nature learns and grows from its experience in creation. Finally, a point comes when God realizes that to maximize growth, he, and we use that term simply for the sake of convenience, recognizes that he must appear to separate from his own nature, to explore the darkness, to explore what lies beyond the perfect light, the perfect knowledge, the perfect oneness. And so he created out of himself, out of the essence of being, beings, human beings, other beings, beings exploring various areas of understanding, beings not created as humankind has been created, beings in other dimensions, beings on other planets under grossly different living conditions, beings exploring the nature of God, and by exploring it, defining it, and by defining it, expanding it. Each group of beings, shaken loose from the body of God, develops in different ways through a complex spiritual pathway that explores the nature of the physical being created by the essence of God and inhabited by his Spirit. So when we say to you, you are all God's, we point to your source, to the reality of the life that burns within you. You have been shaken loose from the body of God to explore this particular darkness, in which there are a certain kinds of fear. by exploring the darkness of fear as you find it in your own nature as you are separated from God, going through many, 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 many lifetimes, wearing many, many different costumes and disguises to prevent you from seeing your true nature, that is to say, your God nature. You explore in the dark. Now, the body of God itself, and of course we're speaking symbolically, the body of God itself is also infinitely complex. It is not all the same energy stuff all the way through. That aspect of God, let us say, that has sparked the life in humanity is a different aspect of God that has sparked life in other beings, in other systems, in other realities, in other parts of this physical universe. And then within that part of God that spawned humanity, that provided that essential spark, there are also groupings of energy, interactive, differing one from the other. We're stating this very abstractly because on this level it can only be seen in an abstract sense. To put it in analogy, let us say this, that when you are fully a part of the body of God, when you are in your home, in the wider reality, you are in groups. That essence of being that sparks you now goes home and joins a group that you are intricately and essentially a part of. Now, we've tried many different terms to define this group: a special interest group, a fraternity, a sorority, a lodge. It is a grouping of kindred spirits involved, and not permanently, but involved for a space of time in a particular aspect of God's essence called humanity, where you are incarnating and reincarnating in the human realm, as all others are, but where the essence of your being is different one from the other. That which you call the angels is an example of a specialized aspect of the body of God. Some of you here tonight, and each of you knows some, are of the angels. There is a particular characteristic, and eventually as your sophistication grows and your sensitivity grows, you're going to be able to begin to understand and recognize the members of different lodges. And members of the angel lodge have a shared characteristic. Usually a love of music is a common characteristic. There is what can really be described as an angelic quality, a quality of joy, an ability to bring cheer that is unique. Not that no other lodges have that possibility, but this is a particular development of that, and a particular characteristic of the angels. Well, there are many like this. The Christ is another of these special levels that have been reached by many, many spirits who in turn divide into many, many more spirits, living life after life, and gradually, as you move closer and closer to the culmination of your journey to rejoin consciously and fully the body of God, all that you learn adds up, and you graduate bit by bit by bit, for you are God's in training. And when your training is complete, then you will be God's in fact. The analogy of God's body and earth life is a complete analogy. all that you will find in symbolic terms in your earth life helps, when you understand it, to define the nature of God and the process of God in growth, development. Each of you is an aspect of God. Now, we've said all along, you are each other. And gradually, as you go through this process of evolution, you will learn to look in each other's eyes and recognize yourself at a different point on the pathway, wearing a different disguise. When we say you are working through human duality to reach wholeness, we are also speaking of your recognition that that wholeness does not end within yourself by ending that personal duality. But wholeness ultimately is the rejoining atom by atom with all of your brothers and sisters, all of your fellow beings that are a part of God. The journey, in temporal terms, is very long, but then again you have eternity to do it in. Your interrelationship to each other, your common identity as one being, apparently divided into many, that gradual comprehension as you grow permits the reintegration of humanity in oneness. That is to say, not in this frame of reference ending the bodily appearance of separateness, but going beyond that. Well, as you grow in the spirit, as you allow your spirit to fill you, to animate you, your higher self finally to join with ego and body and create a triunity, as you go through that, as you heal yourself, you are in the process of becoming one, and your psychic spiritual sensitivity and abilities and talents grow just as in earlier evolutionary leaps. Your physical abilities grew, and then your mental abilities grew. But when this aspect of your being grows in unity with the other major aspects of being that form you as a apparently separate human being, you are overwhelmingly strengthened because of the wholeness. You're not working against yourself, as you have been in developing the body and fighting, literally fighting each other in the ages before Christ, and then with the promise offered by Christ and the release into full responsibility for your life, you developed your mind, but again developed it in duality. So while on the one hand you were creating healing, on the other hand, you were creating engines of death, not knowing your true nature, dwelling part of the time in the darkness, in the fear that was interpreted through you and brought into manifestation upon the earth. Now the age of the Christ has come to its fruition. The promise of love, forgiveness, and wholeness, offered freely as a gift, and politely and impolitely declined for the last 2 millennia, is now by you and by many the world over being accepted at one level of comprehension or another, received. And the reception of that healing and forgiving energy changes you, transforms you, ends the duality, and you come a step closer to rejoining God, rejoining each other. This next part of your journey, the next few thousand years, is going to be devoted to exploring that wholeness that you are bringing into your lives now, accepting it, understanding it, developing it, extending it. Your journey will take you to the stars, and will take you to dimensions that are not a part of this space-time continuum. It is a leap that we are talking about, and you look backward against the entire history of humankind, and you will see nothing compared to what the next few hundred years are going to mean in the development of your godhood. As you are filled with the energy of Christ that transforms you, symbolically the Son of God, symbolically representing the godness but also the separation. You explore your wholeness, bring it into perfection. Learn to transcend the apparent bondage of the physical reality. Learning to manipulate atoms and molecules. Learning to change planets. Learning to literally disappear and reappear. To travel through space and time instantaneously. These are gifts of the Spirit married to your gifts of the mind. Your mind, which you distrust so much because it has so often been untrue to you, will be perfected by its coming into equality with the Spirit. And then you will see a tremendous leap forward in understanding and in manipulating the reality. You are coming closer to your wholeness. What does all this have to do with soulmates? Background. In your separation from God, in the diaspora of the darkness of fear, you are separated from the knowledge of your own identity. You are fractured into many pieces. You may look upon your many past lives as a kaleidoscope. A single thing, but many parts, shifting and changing, influencing the pattern by their changes relative to each other, bits of colored glass that represent 1,000 lives of exploration. In that explosion, that fracturing of identity, as you are shaken loose from the body of God, you are fractured from yourself. You are and become each other. We are not speaking theoretically when we say you are each other. There is but one being finding its way back together. The shards of glass working their way back into position that they may be joined into the whole. Many times we speak to you of past lives, and we try to clarify it to a degree by saying that the past lives are not past at all, but simultaneous outside of the stream of time in the physical universe. And that your exploration of all of these spheres that you are here to explore is simultaneous, and that there is a flow of cause and effect, life to life to life to life to life. And that's all true as far as it goes. Beyond that, however, there is but one being experiencing all that there is to experience in each separate shard of glass that together in mirror images forms a coherent and intricate pattern. That pattern is multidimensional. And when we speak of soul mates, we are relating back to what we have said about your lodge brothers and sisters. You are finding your way back enhanced, immeasurably grown, immeasurably wiser when you return than when you left, but returning to your body, returning to God, returning to your other selves that comprise that wider consciousness. Imagine Einstein and the respect that you have for the depth of his mind and the sweetness of his soul. Yet he was a simple fragment of a being made of 1,000 Einsteins to the 1,000th power, and that is each one of you in your real identities. And so these fractured images become immeasurably more powerful as they rejoin. So when we talk of soulmates, we are talking of you rejoining yourself. Another aspect of your own being that for the purposes of understanding and growth has separated not from God, but you have separated not just from God, but you have separated from each other, so that you may explore the same complexes of fears, of limitations, of lies and illusion that your counterparts are exploring. Different perspectives on the same issues. And you join and you rejoin during the course of these many, many lives, playing different roles with each other, sometimes bit parts and sometimes co-starring, but always incomplete, always causing each other trouble and strife and tears and pain. As you struggle to reunite when you are not yet capable of that unity. Now, the happiest marriages that you have heard of in the past in human history have not been marriages of soulmates, but of friends, of those who have healed aspects of karma and imbalance between each other, but not soulmates. You do not reunite with your true soulmates until you are ready for graduation into a new aspect, a new exploration. And that, for most of you, is now in this life. In this life. For most of you, the healing of this shattering experience of separation from aspects of yourself is at this point completed by the reunification of two individuals in a love relationship. That is the primary form and the primary number. Two becoming one. But that's not universally the case. There will be other aspects of yourself, in many cases, with whom you will reunite, not in a romantic sexual connection. Most of you will also reunite with that other splinter self in a relationship, in a romantic relationship. Some will have that primary reunification with a sister, with a friend, sometimes with a parent. Those are exceptions, and we don't even think we're going to go into all the reasons for those exceptions, but there are some exceptions. What we want to get to here is that in this life where you have chosen, freely chosen, despite your stark raving fear, to explore the roots and the nature of the fear, to strip it of the power you have given it over many, many lifetimes, and to see it thus stripped of the power that you have given it as illusion, lies, not real. Those of you that are going through that process in this life are doing so because you are matured, experienced spirits who have come into this life, crippling yourself once again in one or more significant ways, and also creating a network of apparent imbalances, apparent weaknesses that are really only there to point the direction toward the areas of fear where there is true imbalance. And so we say this because we know that many of you, however long you've been on this path and however many changes you have made along the way, look inside yourself and you say, I despair of becoming whole in this life when I still have so many problems. And we say to you, most of those problems that you discern, and very often the ones that you feel the most helpless against, aren't real. In your faith and in your willingness, you are dealing with everything that you have to deal with to complete this final year of your schooling at this university, to graduate. And as they are healed, these other apparent weaknesses will fade into insignificance or simply be understood and accepted as a fragment of the old duality. And we beg of you, try hard not to beat yourselves up, because there is in your life one or more immovable, intransigent obstacles that you feel are going to prevent you from wholeness. It is not true. All that has ever been asked is that you be willing to be healed. And as you are willing, you are healed. You are so used to working exclusively through ego mind that you find it difficult to believe that ego mind isn't the answer, that willpower isn't the answer, that somehow figuring it all out isn't the answer, that there is no answer on the intellectual level. And we've said before, you're better off taking up crossword puzzles than trying to figure out the next step on your spiritual path, or what on earth to do about that habit that won't leave you alone. All you're doing is accepting a gift that was offered long ago, and that you kept saying, well, I'd like to, and it sounds good, but I don't deserve it, so I can't take it. This is the life where you recognize that you do deserve it, and you will take it, and you have taken it, and you are being healed by it, and it is becoming you. You are receiving the energy of Christ that you have denied, and it is changing you in an alchemical process that is changing your nature. And you are all, every one of you, in the persistent, unconquerable loneliness that is inescapable when you are separated from yourself and from God, looking for someone to complete your personal equation, to be that other part of you that you feel, quite realistically, is missing. That relationship that will not rape you of your will, deny you your power, that will be equal, that will be loving, that will be fulfilling, the one you can never find, is yours absolutely and unequivocally in this lifetime now, and soon if it hasn't happened already. Why? Why can Plautus make such an outrageous promise? Because it's time. Because in this reunification with yourself, you are reunifying with yourselves. a process that will continue over hundreds of temporal years in what you see as the future. The soulmate is you with another face. And so when you come together, that's why so often it is on the stage of the spiritual, of the romantic and sexual areas, because you come together to do the final healing. As you know from your own experience in this spiritual process, the final healing sounds good, but it means pain. There is pain in this healing. It is the pain of healing, and it is not escapable. It is stuffable for a time, but it must be embraced and released. And anyone that tells you that you can go through this process of transformation without pain is hiding. And you know better. The pain that you go through is the pain of letting go of illusion, of all that you have ever believed about yourself and about the nature of the reality that you live in. The repository of all your fears, the ego self, is also the repository of all your hopes. It is all that you have known of yourself in the separation of human life. And so when your life, literally your life, is being threatened, you as ego self fight back, struggle, try to stave off the inevitable death, and it is a death. And as you get closer and closer to that time of death that is also the moment of rebirth, anxiety mounts, pain increases, fears return, doubts resurface. And if all that is true of you, then congratulate yourself, because you're exactly where you should be right now. You are in the final stage of preparation for your own healing and for your own reunification within and reunification with that mate to your soul. How is this going to occur and when? The timetable varies from individual to individual. Some of you are indeed with your soulmates now. Not likely in perfect harmony, because at the beginning, that mate to your soul, that mirror image that completes you, and whom you complete, is carrying with it all of the baggage of the issues faced that are so intricately related to your own issues, so intricately related each of you to each other's fears, that often when you come together, you are frozen in horror. Oh no, not this again. Because it is, by and large, going to look like a little more of this again. Because that's going to be the final test to your recognition of the illusions of the fears that you have been embracing. You don't want to let go of those fears, whatever you say. You don't want to let go of those bad habits and those bad attitudes. You don't want to let go of a bit of it. Oh, sure, in meditation you think, oh, I feel the oneness, and I feel the spirit, and I feel that wholeness, and how I wish I could feel like this all of the time. And then the first thing you do after meditation, depending on what your problems are, is indulge in them. You have a cigarette, and you have a sweet roll, and you have a fight with your children, and you go on reclaiming all of the fears that you just wanted to let go of. Because that, as far as you know, is you. And if that's gone, if suddenly I am a non-smoker, and I don't overeat, and I don't yell at my children, and I don't fight with my significant other, and I'm not angry and fearful of my boss, who on earth am I? And it's a frightening thing to face. When all this is gone, where will I be? Now, Paul, for example, grew up in a hypocritically, fundamentally Christian milieu. And for him, on his mind, is forever emblazoned, if you're saved, all of the brains drip out of your ear, and you smile beatifically, and you turn everything over to God to escape every vestige of responsibility, and you try to appear as the whited sepulchre. Well, who would want that? And so he clings to all of the evidence that says, that's not me and never will be. Well, that's not ever going to be any one of you. That's as serious a case of imbalance as any. You are becoming God, not slaves to God. God doesn't want any slaves. Why would an omnipotent, omniscient being want slaves? God is creating and recreating himself in you. And so, get off your own backs. The process is happening. You're already gods. You're just taking off the disguises that have prevented you from seeing it. You've given yourself over, not to someone else, not to some guru, not to some vengeful God, but to yourself, to your higher nature, to your wider consciousness, to your spirit. And the road opens before you. And coming toward you is your other self. And if you are involved now in the fear aspect of that relationship, just wait. Work it through. Let it go. Release it. Nothing special, no special plans, no special advice. It is not even a reward, but a logical outcome. So you don't need to give great praise and thanks for it. It is yours. You know, there's nothing wrong with praising God. It's an uplifting feeling, and God certainly doesn't mind. But so often it is a substitute for praising yourself and feeling that you are responsible for these good things that are happening in your life. God doesn't care about credit. God is God. God doesn't need credit. You do. So give it to yourselves. You're all wonderfully brave. Imagine the hundreds and thousands of years and of lives of fear and separation that you are facing and saying, I'm willing to have all of this come again in the faith that I'll see through it and it'll disappear, and it will. It will. And it is. And in this stage of your life, on this path, you can begin to discern the outlines of the reality behind the ghostly facade of the unreal, of the fears that have locked you away. And in this time, where the burst of energy and the final reaction of ego self, the final desperate struggle to remain independent, to remain in charge, when in fact the power is gone and the boat has sailed. It's the last act. It's not real, and you can see through it, and you're going to let it go. And the barriers that have kept you from rejoining your soulmate will be gone. It's important, furthermore, for you to reunite with that aspect of self because of the enormous increase of joy and of strength that reclamation will bring to you. You are the pioneers the pilgrims establishing a new reality in the midst of the old. Just as you have bravely gone through the process of allowing your old self to die, despite the temptations to panic and take it all back, so is humanity going through that same process of releasing that fear, reclaiming wholeness, and half of humanity is going mad with fear because they are not a part of this step of the process. Because they are less deserving? No. They simply haven't reached that point that you have reached. There is no hierarchy. This process goes on eternally. And in another reality, indistinguishable from this one, their opportunity, those parents, those friends, those loved ones, who you finally say, well, I must leave you to your fate because I can't open your eyes. Don't mourn for them. Don't be angry at them. They cannot see what is not visible to them. But living in this world that is dying and being reborn, that vast body claimed by the fear, remaining in the duality, that is the huge, powerful dinosaur that is crumpling to the earth and dying and thrashing its tail back and forth, biting and clawing in its desperation to live. You are the little baby. That's why the story of the Christ on earth, the Christ that has been your model for the age that is now dawning, that story begins in the cradle. The babe. Each old year ends with the old man with the scythe walking sadly away and the bouncing baby taking over. Well, you're the bouncing babies, but one of the qualities of babyhood is that your influence is limited. You must depend upon each other for your nurture, for your confirmation, for your help, giving and receiving, opening, extending the network of awakening beings, uniting around the world spiritually. Yes, of course, that's automatic, that comes with the change. But voluntarily, personally, connecting. You're going to need all of this strength that is coming to you in the years to come. Not because you're going to be fighting for your life. That isn't the plan. The baby lives and grows and replaces that which has been before. But the stresses and the strains are going to be great, and you are babies in your wholeness. Only vaguely aware that you're different than you were, and you do feel better, and you do feel more joyful, and reluctantly, bit by bit, you say, well, yes, this is better, and I guess I do sort of realize that I'm more whole than I was, and bit by bit, you convince yourself of the reality that you are whole. That's going to take a lot of lifetimes right there. And in the meantime, you need each other. As you grow toward each other, and as your soulmate approaches and you approach that person, and your hearts unite. Hearts unite. Why must the soulmate be the last part of this process? Because all of this process in your lives has been focused on your heart. You may have had a clogged survival chakra, or a sexual chakra, or a dependency chakra, or a throat chakra, or any chakra at all, but each and every one of you had a severe problem with the heart chakra, with love. Giving it where you thought you were, and it felt good to give it, but receiving it never. This whole process has been aimed at the heart chakra. Well, that's the symbolic home of the spirit. That is love. That is the gift for this generation. And as that finally opens, then you're ready to reunite with that mate to your soul, whose heart has also opened. You will not, cannot, be linked together unequally with unbelievers. It's a simple statement of fact. If that is your case now, it will end. You cannot coexist in such a relationship. If you cannot be yourself, if you cannot stand free and touch each other out of love and strength and not cling out of weakness and fear, no relationship will work without that freedom and without that equality, because that's what you've been reaching for and working for. And as you accept your personal freedom and accept the responsibility for your lives, as you begin, however dimly, to recognize that reality is so much more than you had ever thought, and that the Spirit of the Christ and the Spirit of God is real to you, however difficult it may be to define, you simply can't be with one who is not there and cannot be there. This is a continuing process. We call you the graduating class and the pilgrims and the pioneers, and so you are. And so will many be who are perhaps only now beginning to open their eyes and look around and wonder what's up. And many others who are still sleeping but will awaken. And perhaps you'll waken them to the joy of awareness. And gradually more and more will end their slumber. And finally humanity itself will have been recreated and risen from its own ashes. But you are among the first. It was during the time of your own process, both unconscious and conscious, of willingness to release fear and to become whole, that the Christ energy began its release last spring. So you are unique. That eclipse period last spring began the release of Christ energy, the release that swells and recedes, is rhythmic in its release. That first rhythm of breathings in and out comes to an end now in October. An ending and a beginning. Now, there isn't a date that we can point at for each one of you and say, at this date, you're going to wake up whole. Because you're already whole and you already are waking up to realizing it. That'll take you a varying amount of time before you can say, by gosh, I am whole. But a process of energy change of which you are a part will have reached an important point of ending and beginning next month. And we say to you that you will be rejoining with your own soulmates. Many of you have begun that already. Those of you who have already begun and who are with the person who is the soulmate and have been dealing with issues and problems with that person will find that you are healing that relationship in concert with the partner. Others of you will end present relationships over the next few months, over the next year perhaps, because it will no longer be tolerable to you to accept less than your due. Most of you, yeah, there may be some exceptions, but most of you will be reunited with your soulmate by the end of 1987. And we'll stand on that. But we want to remind you again, while for most of you that will be in the context, whether heterosexual or homosexual, of a ongoing, committed, romantic, sexual relationship, For others of you, it will be a powerful, loving, deep, and in other ways completing relationship with a friend or another person in your life. You'll know. You'll know. And so that which has been splintered and fractured begins to be healed, to be reclaimed, and gradually, bit by bit, your consciousness is healed. This next stage that we're talking about, of which you are the pioneers, is only another beginning. It will be vastly more satisfying to you, because you will be whole during its exploration. But it is only another step on the way to your oneness with God. Soulmates. It is God in the act of reconstituting himself. It is you in the process of becoming God. The mate with whom you connect completes the puzzle, ends that empty feeling, along with your healing inside. The connection with the soulmate ends the loneliness and puts the stamp on the ending of the process and the beginning of the new. So it is not a soulmate that we're speaking of that comes every lifetime. It is once that you rejoin. And you have heard in this lifetime so much, and so much contradictory, about the whole idea of soulmates, that you are awakened to the concept, and that's all that's been important, so that you are ready to rejoin. We want to make this as clear to you as we possibly can, so you'll be looking in the right direction, and not waiting necessarily to be swept off your feet by the man or woman of your dreams, because it may well not appear in that guise at all. It's much more likely that you're going to greet with dismay this connection. But only at first. Only at first. You know, it's when you see in your children that which you believe to be your own flaws, how angry it makes you. And when you see in another aspect of yourself the reflection of weaknesses that have haunted you, that brings out anger. All of you have been locking anger away. Anger is not wrong, and it is not bad. It is healing. Rage is not. Rage is what results when you stuff anger indefinitely. And you have all, to one extent or another, been stuffing your anger, because it has been socially or culturally unacceptable for you to directly express the anger at the human beings to whom it is directed. You have felt that you have had to stuff it. The answer to anger long stored is not to vent it. And so many people look at me unhappily, and when I talk of reconciliation and forgiveness, and say, am I going to have a confrontation with my father or with my mother? It's the father or mother that's the biggest issue in a particular life. We say no. Sometimes you do, but only if it's going to be healing, not if it's going to be destructive. The gift that you've been given is forgiveness, not the ability to win a battle. but to forgive. And what is forgiveness? To say, I forgive you is easy. We just said so. I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. But what does it mean? It doesn't mean a damn thing. Forgiveness is a gift of understanding and recognition, where the mists begin to part from your eyes as your heart opens, and then you look, for example, at your parents, and instead of seeing the beatings, instead of seeing the anger, instead of seeing the indifference, instead of seeing the absence, you see with a cry of empathetic pain the causes, the torment, the sadness, the blockage, the frustration, the desperation. And your heart opens in a rush of love. It is part of the recognition that you are each other, and that you share, and that all of you must suffer to end suffering. There doesn't have to be a confrontation of anger. You don't have to decide that on such and such a date to get this damn thing done with, I'm going to have it out with Dad. You don't have to worry about that. Your allegiance is to the God in you and to your graduation from frustration and limitation and sadness and loneliness. And the process is automatic once you give your permission. You don't have to question, you don't have to wonder, you will, but you don't have to. And you need to, every time you do it, remind yourself, I don't have to do this. I'm choosing to suffer. I'm choosing to hold this pain to me. I know this pain, this is my pain, you can't have it. Nice pain. And you do that, you know, you all do that. You hold the pain to you. But now you can let it go and keep reminding yourself, well, I don't have to do this, you know. There's another way, and it's coming. And when it comes, and as it comes, and it comes bit by bit, and before you know it, you're starting to think, you know, if I didn't know better, I'd think I was becoming a pretty nice guy. I really acted very kindly in this matter, and I think I would have blown up. How generous I've become, how loving, how forgiving. And don't throw that thought away or shove it down and think, oh, I hope God didn't hear me say that. He'll surely punish me. Because it's true. It's true. You're finally becoming human beings. And your hearts are opening. And the love is finding its way to you. And though you are confused and lost in the struggle, wondering what on earth is going on, being battered by the rapidity of change, trust and faith must hold, because the process is being completed in each one of you. And you will reunite with each other. And the love that you thought was going to be forever denied you will be given to you because you have learned to love yourself and therefore receive love. It's a promise, not Plautus's promise. It is the promise of Christ that all you had to do was turn the key in the lock, open the door, and find all that you have felt that you have been missing in your separation from yourself, from your other selves, and from God. So we're going to stop now for a break, and then we'll come back and answer questions.
Plautus, is there a way to tell through astrology, if one is a soulmate? I mean, obviously we know in our hearts that it's a soulmate, but is there a particular match-up astrologically?
No, it's going to vary. Great, you mean a particular configuration of signs. Not really. You can tell close affinity, but there is no characteristic sign for the soulmate because the relationship with you is going to be, there's going to be a commonality. So there'll be a relationship between the two charts. that you will see, similarities. But the similarities are going to be in the areas of the chart that rule the issues that are being dealt with in this life. Let's see.
Plautus, when you were talking before, I felt like, I don't know, it was sort of like a vibration that I would discover.
Within yourself?
Yeah, that I would help me to find out who or which soul is really just plain compatible, but a vibration that...
Well, yes, there is a vibration. There's a recognition on that energy level. And it is, in a sense, it's the same sort of vibrational recognition that draws you to other souls that you have spent a good deal of time with and that are in your life for high purpose. It is magnified in the case of the soul mate, but there is a commonality of energy. Now, we've said to you that each of you as energy systems are unique, which is true, but in the connection with the soul mate, there will be a complementary relationship between the separate energies, and so there'll be a recognition on that level, sort of recognizing a family connection.
Plautus, when you say that the soul mate is not one we've connected with before, you're saying in this way before.
Yeah, in this way. Of course, you've lived many, many lives with those who are the mates to your soul, because you are there in your separation to bring varied perspectives to the same issues and to interact. So, yes, you will have been connected many times with the soulmate.
And is it possible that we may be meeting with more than one soulmate?
In a sense, yes. And we've indicated that by and large that's the exception rather than the rule, because usually these aspects that are separate have already been joined, and this is a final joining. So in other lives, that shattering of pieces that is you have picked up bits and pieces, not the true mate to the soul, but other aspects of the soul.
But in this particular life, like would I say, Cynthia is my soulmate, is she not?
Yes.
Is it conceivable that I am going to be joining up with another soulmate as well?
All right, this opens another area. The connecting process, as we've indicated, continues. You are not only the aspect of yourself that is joined with that other aspect of yourself called soulmate. You are joining together gradually over this coming era with a larger number of people that have been a part of your image. Most of them, however, will have already joined together. In other words, you, this person here, is already partially completed by incorporating into yourself aspects of being through other lives that comprise your totality. And in completing yourself with the soulmate, you do complete a major step in that process. You're not going to repeat. You may add. There is just the one soulmate at that, in that sense. But there are other mates to the soul in a different and wider sense that will be continuing in this life and in many lives to come. But in the sense that you are thinking of it, we don't think so.
Plautus, is it possible to have met your soulmate previous in this lifetime, but didn't recognize it or had to go in different directions? You both had to learn and grow and
Yes.
pull and come together
Oh,
still
yes.
in this lifetime?
Yes, and very, not infrequently that will occur. In fact, sometimes you'll get together just to scare each other.
I'd like to ask another question, Plautus, and that is it possible that I will never meet my soulmate in a body? I might meet a vibration the same as mine, but it wouldn't perhaps be in a body.
No, we're talking about connecting with another aspect of self in human form in this life. Not necessarily the romantic mate, but the mate to the spirit.
Thank you.
You are always connecting with other aspects of energy in other dimensions and in other eras of history. And you know, those of you that have taken some of our courses, that we've connected you to in a meaningful way to Egyptian connections, to Atlantean connections, to other life aspects of your shattered being for spiritual purpose. So that is a continuing process of reassembly.
I think I missed something in the background because you started out saying that we're all one.
Yes.
So what makes soulmates different than everyone else?
Yes. We are all one, and all human beings are returning to that oneness, which is total and complete identification and integration with God. That, however, in temporal terms, is a very, very long process of reunification. And so you come together a cell at a time. Finally, when all of the cells are joined in a oneness that is completed by all cells joining together in the pattern necessary, then the whole process will be completed. So you continue to meet bits and pieces of yourself. You continue to expand your perception to recognize the commonality of the spirit in all of humanity. But before you return completely to the Godhead, there are many steps along the way.
Plautus, in January I had a private reading in which you said that I would be married or like involved by January of 87, and that it would be likely to begin in the fall.
Yes.
Well, it's fall.
Yes.
Am I still on schedule?
Well, with the understanding that Plautus does not run a dating service for soulmates, the indication is still that there is this coming together, and if it hasn't happened already, it looks very, very close to you. And we would say that in looking, that it looks about the same, you know. It looks like things are developing appropriately.
Thank you.
Plautus, I've met my soulmate, and I'm having a difficulty in understanding how I am growing in this connection with him, but I'm supposed to let him go.
Yes.
I don't understand. This polarity is driving me absolutely crazy. I was screaming last night. Will you talk about that?
Yes. Letting go is almost invariably misunderstood, because the thing that you're most afraid of is losing something. And letting go isn't losing anything at all. It is, in fact, the only way to gain. That in the case of a love relationship, you know, throughout history and in this life and all of these other lives, you have come together with each other out of your mutual loneliness, your mutual neediness, and feeling that each can fill somehow a hole within you. And so you lean on each other, you use each other, you take advantage of each other, all in the name of love. What needs to be released here is that dependency. You cannot be equal and codependent. You must be full of yourself, balanced within yourself, at a point where you are able and willing to recognize that if you never saw this person again, it would be too bad, but you would survive, and you would thrive, and you would prosper, because the joy and the key to joy is within you, not in some other human agency. And so when you reach that point, then you will have released, you will have let go. You cannot hold one you love. When you let go, you are accepting the risk in your faith that which you have let go will fly away, never to return. You have accepted that. But what is for you will not leave you.
Well, I keep feeling that I'm done that, and then there's just all this crap keeps coming back.
Yes.
What do I need to do?
It is a multi-leveled process. We are fastened as human beings so deeply into our issues and into our dependencies, into lifetimes of reinforcement along specific lines regarding our inadequacy, our helplessness, our dependency, that it takes reaffirmation to finally give the release. It takes stages of release. You know, you don't overestimate yourself and the degree of your bondage to fear and to a vision of yourself that is not in harmony with the reality. If you were to let go completely, all at once, well, you would probably collapse and curl up. You can't do that. You'd get the bends spiritually and emotionally. You're not built to do that. You can let go, and you need to go through, and you will go through some very intense feelings of loss and tragedy and the specter of unending loneliness as you release that which you have for so long and so deeply and so desperately coveted. You will go through pain that you think will turn you inside out. The sobs of an abandoned child. But that isn't enough. Each time you go through that, and you think that's the end, you find there's another corner that the dust mop missed. And so you clean that and shake it out. And that hurts. Even though you want a clean house. You've grown attached to the dirt. And so you go through it again and again. It does seem endless, but that's only because you're caught in time and you think that 70 years is a long time. And it's not a long time. And also, we want to say this. Thank you. We've been looking for an opportunity to get this in for several days. And that is to say that because as human beings, separated from your eternal life, you see things as brief. You see your life, increasingly as you grow older, you see it as brief and fleeting and needing to cling to. You lead a life surrounded by deadlines. You have to start school at a certain age, and you've got to finish at a certain age. And if you're not married by a certain age, then you start to wonder about yourself. And if you don't have a child by a certain age, and then you retire at a certain age, and then you die at a certain age. This process, this spiritual process that you're going through, has no deadline. There is absolutely, underline, no rush. The timing for your personal process of release is within you, integrated completely into the timing of the universe. There is no way to hustle it along, and there's no way to stop it. And you waste a lot of time and energy and pain thinking, I'm losing the race, when there is no race. And you look at your spiritual watch, and you look inside yourself, and you say, I should be farther along by now. You have to stop thinking that way, because it's only annoying. You are all, everyone who chooses this path, moves forward at maximum possible speed, considering what you have to explore and what you have to release. And don't look next door and say, they're getting there a lot faster than I am. Because it's not true. Your timetable is your timetable. There is no comparison with anyone else. You are not in a race, and there's no deadline. You are in a process of transmutation, of becoming new. And you have spent many lifetimes becoming old and encrusting yourself in fears and in habits of mind, of body, of energy that have limited you. You have learned negatively over lifetime after lifetime. If I touch this, I'll be burned. If I do this, I'll be frightened. If I do this, I'll be abandoned. If I do this, I'll be betrayed. And so gradually, as your lives go on, they become more and more constricted. Because within you are the buried memories of all the blocks you've run up against. Not to mention the ones that surface in this life and that are all the sharper. So you are obeying the fears of 1,000 generations of you. It's not any wonder that it takes a while to scrape away all of those defenses against a monster that does not exist. And in proving to yourself, you can't voluntarily remove those defenses until you begin to recognize that the monster maybe isn't as real as you used to think. And then you make progress, but there's no rush, and it's working just fine. And if you don't apply those measurements to yourself, you won't think you're taking so long. Yes?
Plautus, you mentioned parents in passing type of situation.
Yes, sometimes that occurs also, not usually, because the parent-child relationship, the lesson to be learned in parent-child relationships is the lesson of release in faith, of letting go. And usually the reunion with the child is not in this lifetime. It is what you learn with the child in terms of release is valuable and helps to open you for the soulmate relationship. But the child must be released to be free, and to come back to you in an intimate, all-embracing relationship is not a likely result. We won't strike it out as impossible, because there are certain cases where it would be possible, and in fact is happening, but it's not likely.
I'm noisy tonight. Talking about timing, Plautus, if you leave a pear on a tree too long, or if you leave it on your counter too long, it becomes overripe and not edible, right?
Yes.
So how do you know whether your timing is right on or not?
That's called faith. Because you can't know in the intellectual sense of knowing. It is not privy to your examination. It is part of your underlying structure as it intimately relates to the universe. You are a part and inseparable from the universe, and so is your timing. Your consciousness, your overt consciousness, is separated from that reality. And so in that you thrash around and make guesses and use this structure of limited value called rational thought and logic to try to figure out something that is well beyond in its scope those limitations. You are moving on a path that is fueled by faith. There are things that you cannot know until you are whole.
So it's an illusion. I mean, if I recognize it as an illusion, that I'm...
Well, the way you recognize fear as an illusion is that it stops scaring you. And you think, and it sneaks up on you. And one day, sometimes with that kind of clarity, you think, now, that's not scary. Didn't I used to be... I know that I used to think that. It's like remembering when you were a small child and you're going to bed at night and the room is darkened and you know deep in your heart of hearts that under your bed is a monster that's going to grab your ankles. And so you leap to the bed with that moment of stark fear that it's going to reach up and grab you. Well, it's not so different from that. And just as unreal.
That was a good picture. Thank you.
Plautus, is it possible if you're with a soulmate that you aren't going to make the adjustments necessary in this life?
No. No, in fact, that's the proof of the pudding. If the adjustments are made, this is a soulmate. And if they are not, it wasn't. Because you are here to reunite. You don't come in at this point in your personal history and the history of humankind. You don't come into that intimate connection with the soulmate if it is not to be. You are prepared already. It's only your own doubts, which are themselves illusion, that prevent you from seeing that. Now, that doesn't mean that you do not have deep, intimate, vital, important, and soul-stirring, and deeply moving, and powerful, and painful relationships with people who are not technically your soulmates, but who are with you co-teachers and co-pupils in an unending process of mutual growth. So in the broader sense, of course, you're all soulmates. You're all of one spirit. But in the narrower sense that we're talking tonight, when you encounter your soulmate in this life, you will, because you have already made the preliminary choices, release each other from the bondage in which you have placed yourself and each other, and unite at a meaningful level.
So if this is going to happen within the next couple of years, and all these people that have awareness are married, I mean, there's going to be a lot of divorces in the next couple of years.
Yes, that's already taking place. There's already taking place. There is a shedding of that which is no longer appropriate. As you change, as you grow, as you become whole, as you start to glimpse who you really are, you can no longer put up with being, in one sense or another, a victim. A victim of yourself, in your earlier blindness, or a victim of the individual with whom you have come together. If you cannot grow together, you must grow separately.
Plautus, you mentioned about the Christ energy that is going to be ceasing, as I understood you to say.
Not ceasing. The energy is being released gradually and rhythmically. All on heaven and earth has a rhythm at the heart of it. In a sense, the music of the spheres is not a poetic conceit. There is a music that underlies the structure of reality, an interlocking, syncopated rhythm of all matter, breathing in and breathing out, cycles of change. And so it is with the release of the Christ energy. It is released not in a steady stream. It is released in waves. This will be the culmination of the first wave and in its effect upon those who have received it. Born out of that culmination is a new beginning. The Christ energy will never cease to be released. It is now and becoming the energy of the reality. Whether it's called Christ energy, whether it's called a higher energy, whether it's whatever it's called.
There's since this is the Aquarian age and Aquarius is the water bearer, is there a significance in water that's going to be taking place anyway, that water will manifest in helping healing? Or?
Well, of course, the Piscean age that is passing is the most watery of ages. And the Aquarian age, while it is the bearer of water, is itself an air sign and symbolic of the reaching toward the sky, reaching toward the wider reality. The bearer of water is related to the age that is passing and the age that is going forward, related to the unification of what has been, of Homo sapiens, of the mind of humanity, with the spirit of humanity. And so that which moves on into the air, so to speak, into the wider reality, bears with it the water of what has been. So it is a sign of unification, in a sense, a sign of triunity. Yes.
Plautus, will the next wave of Christ energy be of more intensity?
Yes. Each succeeding wave in the immediate future will be of increasing intensity, both because of your capability of receiving it at a higher level of intensity and energy, and the fact that more and more people will be receiving it. So they're more in numbers, and it is greater in its in the intensity of its release. It is also related to the polarity. And as the Christ energy grows, the energy of love and forgiveness and freedom, so does the energy of slavery, of hatred and limitation, of fear grow. And so as that increases, and you see its evidences in war and in famine and in terrorism and so forth and so on, it is an accompaniment in the increasing process of polarization to the release of the Christ energy and the energy of wholeness. So that builds within it a deep instability in the reality itself, as it, in a sense, splits off. Finally, as the polarity reaches its maximum stretch, there is a collapse, and the process is complete. The darkness, the fear is gone. Gone. Duality ended. As it is ending within you individually, it ends within humanity, timed also with the process of change within the earth itself. You are seeing in this time, in your lifetime, a change so fundamental in the energy structure of earth and its human children that it is as night and day to what has been before. So this process continues, first with greater intensity, building intensity, both positive and negative, until that has reached its saturation point, and it collapses in upon itself. It is seen that the negative is illusion, the purity of the positive becomes the whole. Integration is complete, and the process of humankind moves on to another step. This intense period of polarization is, we would say, roughly over the next 10 to 15 years, or to very near the end of this century. That doesn't mean that on January 1st, 2000, you're going to wake up to a world completely at peace and at harmony. It means that you are going to be engaged in the cleanup and the rebuilding, the construction, the erection of a reality based upon your new beings, your new energy, your new understandings. And you will be spending the next millennia completing that process of redoing humanity and the world. We foresee and have spoken of at many occasions a great deal of tumult in the world over the next number of years, a dozen years or more, that you are here by choice as pioneers to help to negotiate, to heal, to spread the word of understanding, to open doors for others who are knocking, to learn to heal yourself and to share the energy of healing, which is the energy of love, to begin, and it is a hero's task, the job of creating life out of death, of building the new amidst the collapse of the old, of keeping your heads when all about you are losing theirs. You have chosen this task for yourselves because you are capable of it. Yes. So we're going to end this reading tonight, and I'm sure we'll be speaking to each of you on other occasions as we help you to visualize, as we narrate the process of change that is creating a new reality, a new sense of oneness, that is bringing harmony in the place of discord, that is bringing completion and reunification out of the shattered image of God that has been the human lot. This is an age in humankind